Anyway, I thought since this is a spiritual center, it would probably be appropriate for me to open with a passage from the gospel. So, I didn't say according to who. Oh, thank you for getting that. Like one person. Oh, this is very appropriate for this time of year. Congratulations, today is your day. You're off to great places, you're off and away. You have brains in your head, you have feet in your shoes. You can steer yourself any direction you choose. You're on your own now, and you know what you know, and you are the ones who'll decide where to go. Several years ago, we had the pleasure in this community to have Mark Victor Hansen come and speak here. How many of you were here when he came? Several years ago. I had the opportunity during that time to actually have lunch with him, and it was very delightful. And what you may not know, unless you were here on that day, is that by the way, he is the author of, one of the authors of the original Chicken Soup series. And what you may not know about him is that they were actually turned down by 144 publishers before anyone accepted the concept of the short story. Which 144, now that is resilience. That is persistence. So I asked him the question, I said, so on that, what was the difference on that 145th ask? You know, what was different about that situation? And I fully expected him to say something like, well, that was just the magic number, right? But that's not what he said. What he said was, he said, you know what, Cyndi? He said, we just got tired of hawking books. We quit trying to sell books. And he and his business partner, Jack Canfield, made the decision at that point that is, if we have the good fortune to get in front of someone again to talk about our concept, that we are just going to use that to learn about the industry, about publishing, whatever we need to do. So they chose to do that. And what they did was they listened and they asked really good questions and they engaged. And these publishers had the opportunity to see the authentic personalities and their motives behind the stories and the compassion of these people. And he said, what was really interesting, he said, this is where that shift really took place and magic started to happen. He said, as people began to buy us, and we got some credibility out there because of our compassion and our honesty, he said, now all of a sudden, everybody was interested in what we had to say. So what we realized is that the more we push against things and the more we try to make things happen, the more it slows us down in the process. Isn't that true? And so as I was thinking about this talk, I asked myself, what is that unique quality, you know, that energy or whatever it is that causes people to be truly unforgettable? You know, what is that energy? And how do we get it? And what I realized is that it's much easier to recognize than it is to define. So I wasn't sure what it was called, but we know it when we see it, don't we? It's like, I'll have what they're having. I don't know what it is, but I want some of it, right? And so as we start moving through into the process of looking for a minister, we realized that this was a big part of what we had to try to create for ourselves. And in my coaching experience, what I've learned is that it's much less about what we are doing in this process than it is about who we are being in this process. And so, and probably the place that came out most clearly for me is when I had my first experience with heart math. Has anybody done any of the heart math work? I won't go into that because that's a whole nother day of conversation we can have. But my first experience was up in Minneapolis. A friend of mine invited me up there to take this class. And in a nutshell, totally oversimplified, what heart math is it has to do with the study of heart intelligence and also just the energy anatomy of the body. And so they put little electrodes like on our fingers and on our heart and during this activity, and they were literally able to measure, physically measure the energy that was emitting from our bodies. And at this point, somebody told me it's 25 feet, now I don't know, but at this point, several years ago, they literally were able to measure the energy of our bodies 10 feet all the way around the circumference of our bodies. 10 feet. So I want you to stop for just a minute and think, and just kind of try to measure, to gauge in your head, what's 10 feet in front of you right now? So what's in that space, 10 feet, and off to the sides and behind you, right? 10 feet. So what that says to us is that if we are able to physically measure 10 feet of energy around our body, what they realize is that truly if you could harness the power of the human body, it could literally light the city of New York City for an entire week on one human body. Isn't that crazy? That's a lot of energy, people. Look how many people are in this room. So what that said to me then is then if I'm doing that and everybody in the room is doing that, then every single time you walk into this place, or any place for that matter, All of our energy fields are overlapping, are they not? And that creates what Ken Wilber calls your resonance field, which is the collective energy of any community, of any group. So just for a minute, I just want you to take a second and just look around you and see who's around you. Then you're 10 feet. It's just important to make sure that you're sitting around people you want to be sharing energy with, because you are. So who you're being individually really sets the consciousness of the whole group. So as we were looking at what the possible minister search might look like, what we came to realize is that it's not just about sending out our guiding missiles to go out there and figure out how can we lure in someone or seek out this right and perfect minister that's going to come and lead our community to the next great thing. What we realize is that if in order for us to truly be successful at creating a thriving ministry, we had to get really clear individually and as a collective community exactly what it is we want this thing to look like going forward. And as we put our energies towards that, then we can attract the right and perfect person into our experience. So who you are being individually and the individual spiritual development and growth that we are doing plays into the bigger whole. That's our resonance field at this church. My friend Reverend Chris Michaels over at Center for Spiritual Living, he calls that the collective peeing in the pool of consciousness. It's like, it impacts everyone, okay? Now, it's kind of graphic, but I know, it makes perfect sense, because the truth is, we have that responsibility, do we not? We have the responsibility for our own energy and what we bring to the party. And as we do that, we create a resonance field that people just want to be in. And this ministry has a history of doing that anyway, right? We have of really attracting some amazing people into our experience. And we do that certainly with our resonance field. Because what we know for sure is that we are in transformation, whether we formalize the process or not. Because nothing is static. Remember this back from 7th grade physics? That for a reaction, there's a reaction, right? There's nothing new under the sun. What we know is there's a certain amount of energy, and it just keeps moving around. It keeps breaking down and recreating, and that's what it does. So when we start talking about the energy of transformation, we have to realize that we have been very reactive in our lives at certain points around certain things happening, and it's called change. So what we want to do is set our sights today on really describing a transformation that's intentional. So something that we are planning for. We think about resilience, and we normally think about resilience as kind of bouncing back after adversity, but there's an element of resilience that they don't talk to you about. Truly resilient people are really good at reaching outside of their own experience, reaching outside of the walls of their home, reaching outside of their own limited thinking to see what else is out there. And so as we start thinking about resilience as it relates to transformation, I think it was Michael Beckwith that says that society suffers from what he calls intention deficit disorder. Isn't that great? And I use it every chance I can, because an intention deficit disorder, I think it was Edwene Gaines used to talk about this all the time. She said, we treat the Sears catalog better than we do the universe. She said, you would not call the Sears catalog and say, just send me whatever you think I'd like. No, you have to get very specific about what it is that we're looking for, and that's what we're doing right now. That's what all the conscious conversations were about. Really just collecting data and spending time talking with you all about what is it, if in your perfect world, let's just say if you could pick anything that you wanted to, and you can, what would you want it to look like? And so that's really what the conscious conversations were designed to do, is to really help us build a vision that we can start acting on. And we're at that place where we're beginning to do that right now. But a lot of people resist change. It's very uncomfortable. Why do you suppose that is? Part of it's fear. Part of it's just the unknown, right? So is this going to be better than what I've got right now? What is it going to look like? So we start asking ourselves those questions because it's really legitimate. Because as we start to think thoughts and take actions towards our greatest desires, what starts to happen is that the wheels fall right off the bus of your current reality. Don't they? Because we cease to become a vibrational match to our old story. And when that happens, there are circumstances and there are people in our lives that don't get to go with us. And that is a very uncomfortable place to be, is it not? So that's why people resist it. It's like, am I prepared for what I'm going to have to manage in order to move to that next great place that I'm going to? And a lot of people are not. And I will tell you, in my experience, there's several people that are not willing to do that. It just doesn't feel comfortable. Because to the untrained eye, it might look like you are taking a step backwards, but you're not. Yet out there, things can happen, and frequently do, to people as brainsy and footsy as you. You'll be on your way up. You'll be seeing great sights. You'll join the high flyers who soar to high heights, except when you don't, because sometimes you won't. You'll come to a place where the streets are not marked. Some windows are lighted, but mostly they're dark. Do you dare to stay out? Do you dare to go in? How much can you lose? How much can you win? Can we answer those questions? A friend of mine is an avid historian, and he shared a story with me about our beloved city that I'm going to share with you because I thought it was fabulous. Because did you know, back in the times of, remember the gold rush days? Well, probably most of you don't, because I personally do not, but I did read about it in school. But during the gold rush days, well, here's what you may know, particularly if you lived in the city for very long, is that, and particularly in eastern Jackson County, right? Because that is the place that the news spread far and wide, right? That there's gold and then there are hills of California. So people came from everywhere and started moving west to go towards the gold. But Kansas City was literally the last stop on the California, Santa Fe, Oregon Trail before you move into the Badlands, right? To where it was very dangerous. It was a very arduous trek from that point, and people starved to death, or they were scalped, or they died of disease, or there were so many things that were happening. And the truth is, I mean, there's not a whole lot between Kansas and Colorado now. I can say that because I live in Kansas, right? But the truth is, there was nothing there, and they had to navigate the Rockies. There were a lot of things that they had to manage in order to get through that. It was a very, very dangerous time. And so a lot of times what would happen is, and this is why Kansas City was known as the city of cowards. True story. That's not been my experience since I've been alive. But that's what they called it, the city of cowards, because people would come from far and wide, and they'd get as far as Kansas City, and they would look at the risk that was ahead of them in the Badlands, and they would go, you know, I'm good. This is a nice city. I like it here. And so a lot of people literally homesteaded here for fear of what was ahead of them. They did not move forward. And so it makes you wonder, doesn't it, that what are the characteristics of a person who will look at that risk and forge ahead anyway? What kind of a personality, or what kind of things must go through a person's mind for the people who literally not only made that journey, but got all the way there and were very successful, right? A lot of people got rich during the gold rush, did they not? Very, very wealthy in a lot of different ways. And so as a community and in our own personal lives, we have to stop and we have to think about, this is really the same distinction between someone who makes their choices from what they can see in front of them right now, or manifesting from that wealth of the vast and limitless universe that's out there, right? I wonder what else there is. It's like, I don't know for sure what it's going to look like, but I'll know it when I get there. I love the analogy that Rachel used earlier about the mountain climbing. Is anybody here climbers? Do we have any rock climbers out there? I'm not either, but, but they have a wonderful concept in mountain climbing that it's called the commitment move. And basically what that means is, of course, you've got your harness and you've got all your gear on, but it basically means that you are hanging on by your fingertips, right? You may have some footing, but what happens is at some point you get somewhere on the side of that mountain or on that rock that you cannot go any further without letting go of the only thing that's securing you to the side of that hill, which means you have to count on whatever is supporting you to hold you while you move to the next place. And so it's not unlike going through quantum shift that we go through in our lives. So the commitment move is really about saying, you know what, I don't know how I'm going to get there, but I know I'm covered. And a lot of us like to call that faith, don't we? Right? So that's the commitment move. So maybe that's what we came to. Maybe the people who went past the city of cowards were making the commitment move. And Bob mentioned I've worked with probably 150 Unity churches across the country. And one thing that I know for sure is that Unity Church of Overland Park is better positioned than anyone I have ever seen to make that commitment move. You have solid leadership in all areas of service in your organization. You have a beautiful facility in the middle of a very successful, highly populated area. You have a solid, committed, engaged community. You have tons of intellect and knowledge and incredible talent in this community. And you have a history of drawing really cool and amazing people to your community. So this is an exciting time to be here, is it not? Can I hear a woot woot? Yeah, it is. So it's a very exciting time to be here. When we did our conscious conversations, a couple things came out of that. Most of you were pretty energized by the changes that are taking place, and that was good. We were glad to hear that. But some of you actually said, you know what? If you guys could just not change just for a little while. Like, I think Bob mentioned earlier today, he goes, you know, boring doesn't sound terrible to me, right? Just for a week, and then we're good, and we can move right back into the action, right? And so, what we need to help you understand is that sometimes what feels like chaos is really just kind of that moment right before order begins to take place. Right before we move into that strategic plan that's going to take us to the next highest level. But it looks like chaos to us sometimes in our own lives, doesn't it? I want you to think back to Greek mythology. I'm going to challenge your middle school again today. All right? Think back to Greek mythology. Remember that the term chaos, or chaos in and of itself, was actually described as the original dark void. Do you remember that? Thinking way back? The original dark void. And it was that divine connection from which everything emerged. Now, it doesn't say from which adversity emerged. It said from which everything was created. Everything. So if you think about the first two things to ever come out of chaos in mythology, the first one was Gaia, and the second one was Eros. Now, Gaia was the deity probably most commonly known as Mother Nature or Mother Earth. Remember Gaia? And the second one was Eros. Anybody remember what Eros was known for? Yes, he was the god of erotic love. What's not to like about that? Also known as the god of human desire. So in reality, the most basic derivatives of chaos are the two things that have the greatest capacity for expansion and growth. Nature, human desire. Nothing comes to us in order, does it? And we wouldn't want it to. We don't want to get our marching orders at the beginning of the day that says, and you'll be here at 9 o'clock, and you'll be there at 10 o'clock. You know, one of the things that we got as a result of being on this planet is that God gave us free will, right? We were empowered with the ability to make some decisions for our own lives and live by the consequences of those decisions. My dad used to tell me from the time I was very small, because I used to ponder things forever because I was so worried about making a wrong decision. And he said to me, he said, Cyndi, here's the deal. You make a decision. If it turns out to be not the right decision, then you get to make another decision. He's like, it seems so easy to him. Then just make another decision, right? And so what it does is it helps us realize that there's very few decisions or things you're going to do in your life that are totally irreversible, right? Or they're going to alter your life in a way that can't be repaired. So the key, I guess, is to do something even if it's wrong. So the point that we are right now is moving into action as a ministry, and we're excited about that. So we have to be patient with ourselves. Think of the butterfly in the chrysalis, right? That is not a rapid process. The animal literally has to break down into this gelatinous mass before it turns into another animal. It's very slow, it's very deliberate. But a lot of us are very uncomfortable living in the goo of that chrysalis, aren't we? Ambiguity. It is the goo, right? We're living in the goo, right? So living in that ambiguity is a very difficult place for people to be. So sometimes we're more comfortable with the devil we know, right? So we stay where we are because it's familiar to us, right? But as it relates to the butterfly, though, is that in that chrysalis, when things begin to break down and it turns into something larger than it was before, it's very difficult sometimes for us to see the beauty that's about to emerge from it. And so we get really frustrated in that process. I have a friend that says, when one door closes, another one opens, but it's hell in the hallway. We've already been in the hallway, people, right? And so now another door is opening for us, and that is choice. So we're making some choices. That's exactly what this afternoon is going to be all about. I really want you to really ask yourself, what is Spirit calling you to do? Because we have some opportunities, and we're not going to be signing people up for stuff this afternoon. We're just going to get real specific with the information that we got in the conscious conversations, what we know about the strategic plan. We'd love for you to join me and the board and all the other magic makers that are in this room. The YOU is going to provide a wonderful lunch, but I believe that they are doing a love offering basis, so they've got a little fundraiser going on right now too. So they're going to provide some food for us, and then we're going to stay from 1 to 3 o'clock and really spend some time going through what are the specific actions that we're going to take that are going to get us to that next level. Right? So here's where we use our history to inform our future rather than determine it. I want you to think of it as like your spiritual GPS, if you will. So there's this satellite thing in the sky that just knows where we are, right? The universe knows where we are and what's going on for us. But in your GPS in your car, what question does your GPS ask you? It asks you one question. Where do you want to go? Where do you want to go? It doesn't say, so where were you before that? And why did you stay there so long? It doesn't care. It doesn't care because it has absolutely no bearing on where you're trying to navigate to. So we focus our attention now on where it is that we have created a vision. There's a vision as a ministry. You have visions for your own life. And if you don't, we need to get there, right? We need to get really intentional with our transformation. And that's what we're going to do this afternoon. So the happiness of your life certainly depends on the quality of your thoughts. Oh, the places you'll go. There is fun to be done. There are points to be scored. There are games to be won. Fame, you'll be famous as famous can be, and the whole world will watch you win on TV. And will you succeed? Yes, you will indeed. 98.75% guaranteed. Though real transformation is never quite done, know that now is the time. And we are the ones. So thank you for joining us.